Good evening, everyone. We are so excited to have you here for tips, tricks, and treats navigating STAAR 2.0 for math and science. We're going to be focusing on our SCR with our short constructive responses and things like that. I'm going to give people just a few minutes to add your name, your info to the chat. We are ready to get some good information to you this evening and follow it up with a Work It Out Wednesday. So, welcome. Good evening. We are excited you're here with us for this webinar this evening. So a little bit about us as people are adding their contact information. We are Math-A-Matics tutoring. We have 11 years of experience in educational consulting. We provide just many different supports to schools, not just here in Texas, but across the country. And so we support K through 12 and post-secondary math and sciences. And we do that in a variety of ways. We do instructional coaching, professional development, like this webinar we're doing this evening, but we also do in-school supports for PDs if you're looking for that, tutoring solutions, and more. So you can see we have supported across the state of Texas, Houston area, Dallas, also in Virginia, Louisiana. We've provided a variety of supports everywhere, and we are excited to have you join us. So we want to know about you. If you'll add your information to the chat, and we'll be participating this evening. My name is Jessica Sanchez. I am one of the program managers with Math-A-Matics Tutoring. I support the private tutoring, but also some instructional coaching. And I love doing things like this with the PD this evening. In my other lifetime, I was an administrator and instructional coach for Texas school districts, as well as a 5th grade and 6th grade math and science teacher. So I am excited to share some information with you this evening. My co-presenter will also be logging on in a bit, but we just want to get everything going. We are excited you're here with us. So please make sure you add that info to the chat so I know who's here. And that way I'm ready to support with any questions you might have. We want this to be as interactive as possible. And so, like we said, we will be kind of going through some information for you this evening. This is an abbreviated training. We can definitely extend this for supports at your school or your district. So please know that this is just the little tip of the iceberg that what we can provide looking at STAAR 2.0 questions for you. Our agenda and our information this evening kind of going through, we're going to be looking at STAAR 2.0, specifically the short constructed responses on the science, but we're going to include some information on other new item types as well. We're going to also look at some instructional strategies that are going to help prep for those 2.0 items, as well as instructional strategies for those special populations. Because again, we want to make sure we are focusing on what we need for our kids in those classrooms, and that includes some specific strategies that are going to help close some of those gaps for your learners and things like that. We'll have question and answers and closing as we go through, but please know this chat is open. We are ready for your comments, your input. This is what makes our webinars that much better, is when we get your information and share these ideas across the state for this one. But we also might have some people popping in from across the country, and we'll be excited to see you as well. So please make sure you're adding your information to the chat, your school, where you're from, what your role is, anything like that. We'd love to know who is with us this evening. So please add that in. Kind of our goals for the training. We like to set this up just like we would, and we model this. This is how we do in a classroom. So, our goals for our training, we're going to explore and discuss how new item types for 2.0, like the short constructive response, are being used by the state of Texas to demonstrate those higher levels of thinking for our students. And your kind of I will develop a strategy for fully implementing short constructive response or other new item types in my classroom on a daily basis. So we want this to be beneficial. We don't want them to be scary. We want you to be ready to go and know how to fully implement these in your classroom as you go through. So kind of our 3 components of our webinar today is we're going to go through the new item review type and look at the components specifically of those short constructed responses for science, but also look at those other new item types that are out there. We're going to look at practical classroom strategies that can be used to help learners confidently prepare for STAAR and other 2.0 items. And then finally, we're going to look at supporting those special populations. This is your multilingual learners, students with SPED, dyslexia, 504, your students who are low SES. We're going to look at ways that we can make sure we are fully integrating our instruction for all learners in our classrooms. So participation is encouraged. So like I said, please add your name and information to the chat. You can add any kind of strategies that strike you as helpful or things that you've maybe done that you can share these ideas out with others. And then all of our participants tonight are going to receive a set of sample STAAR items for use in your classroom. So we are excited. We've got a little sampler for you to get you going with some of the information we're discussing this evening. And these are some screenshots from our STAAR sample guide. So when we talk about STAAR and STAAR 2.0, so we're moving beyond the bubble, right? Last spring in 2023 was when the state of Texas rolled out new item types, which they're calling STAAR 2.0 questions. And we know that, right? So the additions of these new item types made a significant shift in testing. So we're used to that bubble, A, B, C, D. Which one is multiple choice? Which one's our answer? We've had those gridables that we loved, right? In Texas also. And so with this, we're really looking at what do the students know and how can they showcase this in a multiple ways. So as we move into this first section, I kind of want you thinking about what benefit do you see to the short constructed response and other item types on student learning? So what benefit could there be for the state to move from the bubble to 2.0? Welcome, Angela from Georgia. We're excited you're here. You know, this is some good instructional strategy you can implement, even though it's a little bit Texas driven. I think you're going to hear some great things that are going to be excellent for your classroom as well. So when we talk about these new 2.0 item types, you know, they're going to encourage those deeper learning and critical thinking. And we all need this, whether we're in Texas, Georgia, wherever we're at, we need our students really learning to think. We want that better alignment with real world skills. So when we're talking about these 21st century learners, we want these students that can problem solve and think through. And so that's part of what we're wanting to do with these 2.0 item types. It's going to reflect that instructional shift. And also, it's going to provide a broadened assessment approach. It's going to allow us to see beyond, can they pick just any answer? Welcome, Ms. Jackson from Virginia. It's going to allow us to move beyond any just picking randomly. We truly want to see what these students know. And these are, through these new item types, we're building this type of instruction into our classroom day by day. You're going to really push your students to those higher levels of thinking. And so, there were 14 new item types for STAAR 2.0. 12 types can either be seen on math and science, science only. It varies by course and grade level. So some of these are going to be third grade, which is where we start standardized testing in Texas, all the way up to end of course in high school. Some are only going to be 6 through 8 in end of course, so it varies. But these are utilizing technology to help showcase learning in new ways. So the state of Texas moved to online only testing, as we know if you're here in Texas. And so we wanted to look at ways that we can really use that technology to our advantage to grade and get some good information. So again, our focus is going to be on those short constructed responses, but we're going to reference some of those other item types that we're going to see as well.
Ms. Sanchez, can you go back to 2 slides real quick? One more. Yes, so the impact that it has on students, one of the things that's very interesting when we look at the data for the different question types, there's some of the new question types where students are actually performing better than they perform on multiple choice questions. So these new question types give students an opportunity to show their level of understanding in a variety of different ways. And of course, while there's some that they do struggle with slightly, there's certain question types that are actually more comfortable to students, and they're showing to perform better than they are on those general multiple choice style questions.
Absolutely. Thank you for adding that, Deidre. Deidre is our learning and development manager here with Math-A-Matics, and she'll be joining us on screen in just a bit, but we appreciate that input. And so I want to note here, I put a little asterisk at the top if you notice. Some of these will also be seen on ELA, social studies, but for the scope of what we do here at Math-A-Matics, our focus is math and science. So we are specifically looking at these from the lens of what supports we provide. And so some of these are math only. We've got equation editor, graphing, number line. This inline choice is really interesting because they're choosing options from a drop down. We've got fraction model and then our match table grid. So these are math only. When we're looking at math science with that little asterisk, because it's available in other subjects also. Text entry, just a quick little 1 or 2 words that the students are typing in. And that builds into what we'll talk about with our short constructed response. With our hotspot, those are different areas of a graphic where the students might have to reference a piece on the graphic and then provide information showing that they understand that graphic. We've got drag and drop where we're using words, symbols, numbers to take information to a graph, to a chart, showing our learning in different ways. Multi-select, it's more than one answer. So you might have 2 or 3 correct answers. And these are those things where we're still doing multiple choice, but we've trained these kids, there's one right answer. And so really working through that there could be more than one answer and why there might be 2 or 3 correct answers. The science only ones specifically talk about multi-part. And I love this multi-part because it says, okay, here's answer A. And then answer B, they're having to provide that evidence as to why they chose the answer for A. And then short constructed response, we're going to be going into detail, but it's just a paragraph or less. And we'll talk about the importance of that, of information applying their science knowledge. So looking at these, welcome, Miss Monica. Looking at these, if we're talking about just these in general, I want you to add to the chat, right? Which of these new item types presented provides the most anxiety or stress related to implementing them instructionally in your classroom on a daily basis? Those of you that are joining us from out of state, how do these relate to ones that you have in your state on your exam? So which of these are most like on your Virginia exam, on the New York exam? Which of these from Georgia? Which of these are like items that you've done? Because I know for several years, there's been those open-ended questions that we're going to talk about that Texas is moving to. And so these are things that you've seen for a bit, I'm sure. And so which of these in your experience provided that just stress as you started to implement them in your instruction? And definitely add that to the chat. Welcome, Miss Sanchez, another Miss Sanchez from Midland, Texas. I believe you've been here with us before, Miss Sanchez, so we're excited to see you back. So when we talk about these short constructed responses, when we say a short response, we truly mean a short response. And we see these in 5th grade and 8th grade science, because that's when the state of Texas requires science testing. We also have them for end of course. So let me add that too. It's on our end of course exam as well. So it has 3 parts, basically. The information that we give the students or the stimulus. And so we'll see a few examples of what this looks like. The directions on how to answer that stimulus, and then a response area where students will answer. Now, typically, because we are doing online testing, this would be a box where they're typing in their answer with their response. It's important to note that we have to answer it in the written response area. It's scored using a prompt-specific 2-point rubric. So every SCR has a rubric that's slightly different. Thank you so much, Stacy. And then the responses require the students to answer 2 parts. So it's not an essay response. And this is something that's real important to portray to the students as you're practicing this in the classroom, as you're getting prepared. It's no more than 475 characters as we talk in our text-specific world, right? These kids are tech savvy. And so 475 characters, it gives them that text response. So this is basically 2 to 3 sentences worth of information, definitely less than 1 paragraph. So we've got to teach them how to be concise. We've got to teach them to get very specific with the information that they're providing. And it's worth 2 points. And they can earn partial credit, 1 point for answering part of the question correctly. And hopefully we're not going to have any of those 0 points, but there is an opportunity to earn 0 points. We're going to talk about how to make sure that doesn't happen for your kids. And then the important thing also to remember is, even though it is an online test, these are graded by human graders. And so they're evaluating based on the rubric. So, sometimes we get that anxiety when it comes to a technology-based test that a computer is going to take the student's response and score it. And in this case, right now, the state is having human graders evaluate those rubrics.
And so real quick, that might be a change to some of the people that are on on our workshop today because there was some information put out that stated that the state of Texas was going to be using AI generated grading, but that is something that they have stepped back on and made the adjustment to go back to human grading until they're able to identify that computer style grading is going to be efficient. So yes, if you have heard about it not being graded by humans, that is was correct for a short amount of time, but that has changed back to having actual people score these for the students.
And so just to kind of give you an idea of the rubric, today we're talking more about the instruction piece. So I want to present you with the sample rubric, but we're not going to dig too much into the rubric for today. That would be part of an extended training that we would do. But when we're talking about this, the 2 points is providing an accurate answer that addresses both parts of the question. 1 point would be a partial answer. It's only giving half of the correct details, and 0 points, which we don't want, are those incorrect or irrelevant answers. And so this is just an example of a 5th grade one from the state of Texas. And so we see here, this is that question information. This is that stimulus part that we talked about. A group of students created a model to demonstrate, and it goes through the procedure that the students are going to go through. It has a model for that diagram. And then here's your question. Which 2 processes of sedimentary rock formation are being modeled, and how are they being modeled? So here we're asking 2 questions. The students are going to need to know first the processes for sedimentary rock formation, but then they're also going to need to know how they're being modeled. So not only do you have to be aware with what the process is, but they need to relate it to the model that they're using in a sample science lab classroom. And then here's those directions. Read the procedure, look at the diagram carefully, enter your answer and explanation in the box provided. Now, because it's not on online, I don't have that box right there that would show where you would type your answer. This is just the prompt that we would provide. I think it's important to note that while this 5th grade example does have a visual, there are times that the state is going to provide this just words only without a visual, right? So this says, which 2 body systems are most directly responsible for students being able to feel rain on their skin? So this is just students have to take that information, use their critical thinking to process it, and then from there, answer the 2 pieces. 1, identify the body systems. So we said they always have 2 parts. And 2, explain how these systems are responsible for creating a sensation on your skin. And then here's your directions. Enter your answers in the boxes provided. So we'll see a few more of these as we go through. And I just want you to kind of keep these in mind as we're going. But you can see the state may or may not provide a graphic, a chart with that stimulus. And so we've got to make sure we're presenting these in a variety of the ways so that the kids are not expecting a graphic every time. We all know that if there is a science question, or even with our math questions that provide some kind of visual, the diagram, that the chart, it's usually easier for a student to identify than just pure words. So what are we doing to prepare them for both scenarios? So discussion time. And I want you to think about it. You can drop it in the chat. And I want you to tell me which part of preparing for these short constructed response items do you feel are going to require the most time and effort? And so as we're kind of going through, these are different things than what we as educators have been showing in our classroom for a lot of years, right? We're moving to beyond the bubble. We're moving where there's these new item types with the text entry, the hotspot, the multi-select, the multi-part, these short constructed response. So not only are we preparing students to receive the knowledge, but we've also got to be able to have them send it back to us in a variety of ways. So that takes different lesson planning, that takes different conversations in your PLCs, and we provide PLC coaching support as well to have these conversations. Deidre mentioned we're going to have to unpack the questions for sure. And so just like Miss Jackson said, making sure students are offered a variety of opportunities for these types of questions. And so absolutely, exposure to this is going to be crucial. Making sure we're having good conversations, and that's what we're going to kind of move into this next part. I love it. So we want to make sure that students are coherently explaining their understanding. And that's so crucial too, is I think we're so used to students are very used to how far you push things for them, right? So if you're only ever giving them a thumbs up, thumbs down as your formative assessment, or they're going to the four corners without the conversation, that's mimicking what we're expecting with those old school bubble questions, right? With the multiple choice. And so how are they coherently explaining their thinking? How are they truly showing us that they have the knowledge and they're able to apply it? And we're going to talk about some of those applications that we can see. So just again, if we want students to be prepared for 2.0, for these short constructed responses and other item types, what types of daily practices can we provide that allow students to feel confident and successful by end of year? We're out there, we're in the classrooms, we are pushing these students, and as teachers, we are pouring into them. Absolutely, we know that these educators are giving all they can to these kids, and so we want to pour in a way that these kids walk up to that testing date feeling successful, feeling ready to go and ready to tackle all of these new item types, not just feeling ready to bubble on a test. So the STAAR and other 2.0 items do not have to be scary. It's crucial to provide the supports that build in conversation in the math and science classroom. So in both areas, right? We want that early and consistent exposure to the new item types, just like Ms. Jackson said, making sure students are offered a variety of opportunities, right? For the SCR specifically, making sure students are familiar with the rubric and what quality responses look like. And we talk about this a lot when you do that PLC format, is having students know what a quality answer is. And so are they familiar with what gets them 2 points, what gets them 1 point, or what would not score them any points at all? And
And I
focusing
know
on, go ahead.
we didn't get any responses in the chat on that one, but I think this is important in regards to practices that can happen inside of your classroom. So in addition to getting students into the routine of explaining their thought processes in, full sentences, it's also important for them to start to self-analyze the quality of the responses that they've given. So like with that rubric and them understanding the rubric, showing them opportunities or giving them opportunities to score their own responses or identify how their responses could be more elaborate or more concise if necessary, because as you'll touch on, there are some character limits on this, so you don't get an entire page to explain a system. You have to be able to explain that concisely and coherently. So I think those things in class, like in 2 sentences explain your answer to this, or in 3 sentences explain what you would do, with this, are important practices for our students to have.
Absolutely. And this applies even beyond 2.0, but when you're talking about for in Texas, our English language learners, these strategies apply to TELPAS as well. So let me throw that out there as well. But we want to focus on quality, not quantity. So students sometimes feel like if they filled up a page, they have a good quality answer. And really digging into what quality looks like, those 2 to 3 sentences that answer, did I answer both parts of this? Did I get a full, complete sentence? Did I use the vocabulary correctly? That's going to really help us, because we're talking 475 characters is not much at all. So we've got to get some good information in a short amount of time. So we do provide a whole training on student discourse and student conversations, the conversations that count. So we provide trainings on this. These actually do a great job of supporting the short constructed response, right? So through student discourse, we're having these structured conversations among students to discuss reasoning, problem solving skills. It's going to promote that deeper understanding through explanation and reasoning using academic vocabulary. So when you're implementing these good strategies where students are having quality discourse and good questioning, that's going to feed back those good answers from the students. When you're building that into your instruction, followed up with the written components, this science SDR will seem like a breeze. And so that's really important to remember, is the planning piece of this, the forward forethought of getting this ready for your lessons. It's a little shift, but you're going to build in that quality instruction, which is going to make things like this no problem, because they're going to be used to doing it on a daily basis.
And that quality questioning is very important. So when you look at these SCR style questions, you'll notice how the questions are posed. And the more that you can emulate that style of questioning in your classroom, the more familiar students will be when it's time for them to do it on an assessment.
Absolutely. And so, these need to be built in, and we'll talk about some of that. So, we're talking about that student discourse and those cooperative learning opportunities where we transition then to writing them down because they do have to type a response, will lead to that STAAR 2.0 and SCR success. So, one of the first strategies you can use as you're going through to prepare for these SDRs is think aloud to model your responses. So, when we say, what does implementation look like here? You're going to begin lessons with SCR type questions for discussion, and you will model your thinking as the instructor. So, whether you're in a math classroom or science classroom preparing for these SCRs, students have to learn how to think. And so we'll talk about think alouds a little bit in section 3, but basically you're showing them, hey, this is where I've looked at the stimulus. This is what I see in the graphic. How you identify those key concepts and what evidence you're pulling from the prompt that's provided. And then again, you're going to have students success tip. You're going to have students take turns practicing this. You're going to have them focusing on vocabulary words and concepts. Now, I put a little note here, and so this is just, for those of you here in Texas, but also it can be applicable to other things. This applies to text entry, multi-part, and multi-step, right? So with your text entry, they might start your bridge from text entry to short constructor responses, provide one word, one factor that could disrupt an ecosystem. And so they just identify one concept of that stimulus. And then from there, they're building out a full response to it. Same thing with your multi-part, your multi-step. You're going to break your reasoning into steps. So if we're talking about mitochondria, which of these is a function of the mitochondria, and how do you know that it's functioning correctly? So as we're going through, this is our prompt that we saw earlier. And so if we were going to model out our thinking for our students on something like this might be something that we have as we're going through the lesson for the day and we pull this up, right? And so it talks about a group of students created a model to demonstrate some of the processes involved in the formation of sedimentary rocks, right? So as a teacher, I'm going to go through and say, look how they gave us this procedure to create the model. So asking the students why they think it's important that they provided the steps specifically for this model. And then which of those steps apply to the diagram that's provided. So showing the kids how I'm taking all of this information on this page worth of a prompt and take it and apply it. So I'm going to say, okay, put some sand in a rectangular tray and create a hill at one end with the sand. Okay, that's happening here. So I might even show the students that they're going to mark a little 1 right there for that step 1. Raise the end of the tray. So I'm going to put a 2 right here because that's where the tray gets lifted up. And I'm going to say, why do you think it's important that the tray got raised up with a block of wood at the end? Why do you think that's important to our procedure? How does that change what's happening in this model? So having those conversations, and you could do them with prompts like this, but as we talk a little bit later, anytime you're doing a model demonstration and activity, you can pull in these same types of questions to model your thinking so that we
And
can apply
I
these
love
models too.
I love those questions that you posed, Jessica, because those could actually be individual questions leading up to, like, from one day to the next as a warm up, leading up to them creating a full response to the SCR at the end of the week. But each of those questions is going to speak to the student's level of understanding of that entire concept in the picture or in the SCR.
Absolutely. And I think that's what's so important, Deidre, to mention is, this doesn't have to be done all at once. And so we're giving you these tidbits, but know that this can be built over the course of a week with this one prompt and show them one piece at a time. Or as we talk about later, making sure kids are familiar with one piece of the rubric and really good with that before you move on to the next part of the rubric. So another strategy you might be using is scaffolding responses with graphic organizers. And I want to say this, please make sure if something resonates with you with one of these strategies, add what you've tried with these in your classroom into the chat. Make sure, because we want to include and pull in your information and what you've tried as well. So here, especially, we might use graphic organizers during instruction, like a T-chart that has claim and evidence, to practice building those developed responses. So we might really want to show, hey, I know this process is going to work. Here's why. Here's my claim. Here's the evidence I can pull out from the prompt or my knowledge of science. Here's my claim. Here's what I know. So again, this could be an activity whole group to build out the expectation on independent work. So just like we practice setting up our math problem solving strategies, this could be a strategy you're implementing daily in your science conversation, so that the kids get used to every time there's a science question, they do claim and evidence, claim and evidence. And this is a lot like a drag and drop as well. You might have a drag and drop where you're visualizing, organizing your thinking into steps like the water cycle, right? Exit tickets. We've been using
Is
exit tickets
is
for
claim and
years.
evidence one of those? I'll say claim and evidence. When you mentioned that, like those are some of those repeated themes in science now. When you look at how they've restructured the teats
Hmm.
and the proof and the evidence or the cycles, those are things that come up. So utilizing those in a graphic organizer and getting students used to those processes will absolutely help with them learning how to approach those SCRs when it comes down to showing end of year mastery.
Absolutely. And so exit tickets are not a new thing. We've been doing them for years. We've been using them as formative checks in our classroom. And so we want to make sure we're building these quick checks in. And so what better way to practice a 1 to 2 sentence response than with your exit tickets? So getting very specific with your exit tickets, and instead of just a one word answer like that text entry, really building in what could be like a multi-part, a multi-step. And so this is a little bit longer one. I will admit I picked a little bit longer one for this exit ticket, but it says in fall, leaves on some trees change colors and drop. Animals like squirrels collect food and some birds start migrating. Explain why these changes are important for plants and animals in the fall, and describe what could happen if the birds did not return from migration. So again, we are really digging into that critical thinking. How will it affect the ecosystem if those birds chose not to return from the south back up to north, back to our New York neighbor up there, Monica? If the birds didn't come back to you guys in the spring, how would that affect? And so having those conversations, here in Texas, we're on the other end. These birds, these monarchs, these animals are migrating down to us and further south. So looking at that process in these real world examples. So a success tip for this, definitely reviewing the following day with student feedback implemented, like partner warm-up swaps. Now, I like this little role play, this little scientist, right? He's ready to go. And so, again, using those exit tickets and other opportunities, dedicating time for students to provide their classmates with feedback on the SCR. So, part of being better at math, at science, part of really showing you have the understanding of the knowledge is, can you coach your classmates on that content? And so, like we talked about, building up the rubric. Each week, looking at different criteria. So, first, did we use the vocabulary correctly? Did we answer part one fully? Did we answer part two fully? Did we answer both pieces? Did we do it in short sentences? And it matches some of those other STAAR 2.0 questions we have, but really looking at how can we use that cooperative grouping in our classroom to build in where we are building up learners who can support each other. Because if they're able to critique and provide a counter argument through some of this peer review, they truly are showing that they're thinking through all sides in a scenario. And you do this on your daily basis. You do this as you move into your four corners where the students have taken that multiple choice question. Now, in that four corners, they have to share with a partner why they feel theirs correct. And then from there, they have to share as a group who has the best answer to share out with the class. So again, you can take one question versus a page of 20 and really dig into some good conversations and good content to help your students feel very successful on these types of questions. So again, just kind of showing you here, a student models part of the water cycle. They fill up a clear measuring cup halfway with water, place it on a sunny windowsill. Here's their results. The students want to change their setup to model condensation. What is one change they can make to model condensation, and what would be their expected observation? So here, you might have a brainstorming session with the class where they list a bunch of different options of what the change could be. Move them to the corners to discuss, okay, these think that they're going to add a heat lamp. These are going to change the color of the cup to see what happens with the condensation. These are going to make the room temperature colder. You're going to put all these options out there, have the students move and peer review and really dig into what they feel the best response would be. And then from there, you challenge
This
them to go write that down.
This is also a good example of what you mentioned earlier of, did we answer both parts of the question? So if you're doing a peer review, the peer may be looking for, did they answer the first part here? Did they answer the second part of the question? Or is there any unnecessary information in this answer because 400 characters, not words, 400 characters, like you said, is not a lot. So I think those are some other things that could happen in that peer review. How could I make this answer more concise? How can I remove any unnecessary information but still make it clear that I understand the concept? And did we answer both parts of this question in my final answer?
And so again, kind of like exit tickets, our daily warm-ups, we're going to give a real world scenario, right? Oh my goodness, did anyone notice that they're tearing down the trees across from the Walgreens from that empty field? What is that going to look like for the animals in that environment? Having them discuss in groups and creating a group response. And then implementing with lab activities. I think I mentioned this before, but as you're doing these hands-on experiences and you're modeling things, it's not just did they understand the lab, but how does it apply? And so finding some good conversation around the knowledge they gained from that lab experience, because as you can see in several of those sample SCRs, they set up a lab and want the students to pull the information from it. So this, again, providing the feedback, helping challenge their classmates. Someone might share out theirs at the end of the lab, and someone might ask a question where the students have to think through and follow up with their critical thinking. These are all things that are going to help increase critical thinking for our learners.
And I love that previous example about like the real world, scenarios. That's something that would be great to do, like coming in from a weekend or having students take the classroom, identify certain concepts and want to understand. Why do the clouds look like this after it gets after rain, or why are the leaves turning a certain color? So that's something to where your students could contribute to the learning process and still understand the science behind that, and have to formulate their answer in the style of an SCR.
Absolutely. Or we used to do science in the real world. And so if they brought me in a news article from what they saw in their parents' newspaper, or nowadays, if they screenshot it from MSN.com, if they took that news article and brought it to me, we tried to implement these things and say, this is how science happens outside this classroom. Science is happening all the time. So using those real world examples, which also supports your ELA teachers. So they'll love that. So just kind of, we're getting close to the end of this. So we're saying, how could implementing these strategies increase student confidence in tackling those short constructed response? So I'm hoping you heard something new or a new twist on something that you can apply with these strategies, not only for the SCR, but those 2.0, because they apply in so many different ways. So please drop it in the chat. We would love your comments about what you think, what you heard of a new strategy maybe that you're going to try and apply. I know we talked about the lab implementation using the warm-ups or exit tickets, some role play, using those graphic organizers. We use a couple different strategies, Deidre, that are going to allow us to really dig in from there. And as we kind of get through, this is just brief. I'm not going to go through all this in super big detail right now, because I know we're getting to the end of our webinar, but please know that we have a whole training on this specific topic coming up that we can also provide. And I know Ms. Sanchez was in that one with us a month or so ago, but it talks about why are additional supports needed for those special populations. So when we're talking special populations, we're talking about our special ed, our 504, our multilingual, and also our low socioeconomic students. They can all benefit from those strategies discussed coming up, but also specifically digging into. We're going to build some background knowledge. They need some differentiated instruction, and we want to make that learning accessible and relevant for everyone. And so, not only do we have to think as teachers, okay, we've got to plan the TEKS, talk about the questions that we're going to do. Here's the new ways these item types are going to look. But now we've got to think about what ways are we going to reach all of these learners that we have in our class. Oh, I love it. Angela said that role playing is going to work in her class setting. We love that. Okay, from Georgia. And so some of these strategies that we're talking about, we're going to lower language barriers, not just the academic language, which we all struggle with, but linguistic for those multilingual learners. It's going to build that confidence and enhance equity. And so, explicit vocabulary instruction. You saw that on some of those prompts, there was some very specific vocabulary that needed to be addressed. And so if students are not constantly exposed to the academic vocabulary, not just the language of science and math, but the language of diagram, graphic organizer, explain how. We want to go through all of those things. So it allows the students to make those connections between their native and second language for our multilingual, but also supports the academic language development. And so even if a student is not necessarily in any of those other special populations, our students from low socioeconomic status who are not exposed to the language that we have, they need that language all the time. And so what are we doing to build in that vocabulary?
And this is a great opportunity for those constructive responses to tell those students, I need you to use these 4 words in your response. So when we're dealing with like a certain water cycle, or if we're dealing with life cycles, if you're telling them, I need to see cycle, I need to see herbivore, I need to see carnivore, I need to see these specific words in your explanation, that's going to help tie that explicit vocabulary instruction into what it would need to look like in a constructed response.
Yeah, Monica, absolutely. Vocabulary is where so many students struggle, whether multilingual or just your general students, right? So, how can we build in these vocabulary strategies that are going to make them feel successful? We talked about modeling thinking alouds already. Kind of, it makes the thought process explicit. It allows them to see how to approach a problem, but also it lowers that cognitive load. So the more you model this, whether it's a math or science classroom, you're showing the students how your brain works, because just like we have to learn to work out our muscles, just like we have to learn the words to a song or a dance routine, we do that and we practice that repeatedly to build in that success. And so with our modeling, our think alouds, we're showing them our metacognitive, we're thinking about our thinking, and we're showing them how to go through and approach any of these challenges. So again, they're not challenging by the time we get to the end of the year because they're so used to doing it on a regular basis. Cooperative learning and peer support. I'm sure you heard several opportunities where I said, have them talk to a peer, have the peer provide feedback and look at the rubric, have the peers ask them questions to challenge them. And so when these students are doing these cooperative learning strategies, where you're building that environment where students feel safe to learn, and they know this is an environment where they will be challenged, but they will also be supported, you're going to build the communication skills. It's going to build the language and vocabulary in a low risk environment. And you're supporting that and modeling that year round as you're monitoring these small groups. Because again, if they're doing these things in small groups, guess where you get to be as the teacher? Walking around, hearing the conversations, hearing that, Kim is still struggling with this concept, so I need to pull her to a small group later and work through a little bit more. Or Jose is really got this topic and he's going to be one that you call on in a minute so he can share out with the class and truly feel that confidence in that win for being correct, because maybe Jose never gets the questions right and you can really pull him out and make him feel successful. These are these great opportunities that you're building when you're doing these cooperative learning opportunities around the room. And again, you go from the conversation to the written, and then you're preparing for when they're typing at the end of the year, or conversation to a Google Doc where they're adding their response in a Google form for you to check later. So you're modeling the typing they need to do. Deidre?
I love the conversation to written. When you were mentioning earlier the think aloud and the peer support, those things can be combined together. So having them working with their partner on talking through their thought process about the question, and then having conversation around that before they scribe, that will help them eliminate again those ancillary words or ancillary sentences that don't need to be there, and it gives them an opportunity to think through their answer before they put it down on paper. And they've also heard their peers' ideas, so they make some adjustments there. But I like that emphasis on think through it, talk through it, and then put it on paper.
Absolutely. And same thing, kind of a little bit reversed with telepass, but still, they've got to prepare those answers in that short response for their telepass for our multilingual learners here in Texas to show their English proficiency. So, jotting down, do I have a concise answer, so that as they're speaking on the computer based test, they're able to share their information without the ums, without the uhs and the stumbles and going over the vocabulary. We're building those processes into our classroom on a daily basis. We talked about graphic organizers that understand the relationship between the concepts and organize information. So this is just one science example. But again, this is going to help with the STAAR 2.0, This is going to help the students prepare for the drag and drop or the hotspot type questions, but also analyzing these graphic organizers builds their information so that students can prepare a good response for a short constructed response by being familiar with how they can create their information and organize it on paper before they speak about it or before they write about it. And so, again, just last little thing before we close out tonight. Which of these strategies we've discussed do you think would have the biggest impact in your students, either STAAR 2.0 or for our visitors from across the land, in your students' test prep, and why? What did you hear that was just, okay, this is one of those ones that I think is going to have a huge impact? And so please add it to the chat. We would love to see that, which you feel were the most beneficial for you. Oh yeah, Deidre says she loves a good think aloud. And really think alouds are applicable to all subjects because again, that metacognition or that thinking about your thinking, you do that in reading, you do that in analyzing social studies, but definitely math and science as well. So definitely make sure we're implementing those and planning for those as you're doing your lesson planning. So we're kind of wrapping it up and we're going to move into Work It Out Wednesday. So please, if you're with us, stay with us. We're going to end this live and move into the next one. Ms. Jackson said vocabulary focus and small group sessions for student to student discussion. That peer conversation is so powerful and it's really going to be where they feel comfortable. They start to feel comfortable and confident, and if they truly can share with each other and explain their thinking, they're going to be able to do it on a test. And absolutely, Monica said modeling her thinking will help her students. Absolutely. And so as we're kind of going through, we are moving into Work It Out Wednesday. It's something we do every Wednesday for our parents and our teachers. We allow them to send in their questions to us and we work them out live. And hopefully even you as educators join us because we do some great strategies that we do on our Instagram, our TikTok, and some new ideas for you in the classroom. So join us for Work It Out Wednesday. We do it every Wednesday. And these webinars here come in as we go, but we do definitely enjoy you being here with us this evening. I love seeing some returning faces to join us, and we appreciate that. So for our summary this evening, we looked for ways students can think critically and showcase higher levels of thinking with those new 2.0 and SCR item responses. And we specifically went into an overview of the SCR. We talked about implementing classroom supports for 2.0 and talked about the daily implementation of those strategies that mimic the item types help strengthen performance on the test. And that application and reflection leads to greater student performance because they are taking that accountability for their next level learning. They are feeling confident and ready to go. And then we also went into some specific strategies to support those special populations, such as scaffolding, visuals, and collaboration that's making learning accessible for all. So we did go in just a few different things. All of this we can provide in a more extended opportunity for your school, your teachers. So if you were going to choose a targeted professional development program focused on supporting either the new STAAR 2.0 item types, questioning, anything like that, what types of supports would be expected from your trainers? So we appreciate your interaction tonight. We appreciate the comments and the good conversation. And that's something we definitely try to bring into any PD we do for you guys. And so we do provide just some different opportunities. We look into best practices, looking at that environment that's going to be successful, not just math, but also science achievement, and making sure we're promoting problem solving. We look at instructional coaching. We're able to go into schools and support your teachers with lesson planning, PLCs, good instructional strategies. So if any of this just reaches out to you, please keep in touch. We do provide campus-based or district-based PD supporting these strategies. We can also tailor a training to what your school needs. We are definitely glad to do that. And so I know we had some people from Georgia, Virginia, New York. This was a Texas-based training, but we absolutely can tailor them to your standards in your state, and we would love to do that. There's a QR code here, and you can also reach out to us at partners@Math-A-Matics tutoring.com. Notice that little A in there. You can reach out to our website or call us as well. And so we are wrapping up this evening. Please add any information, questions in the chat. We were glad to support you this evening. Please join us and stay with us for Work It Out Wednesday. We've dropped our email in the chat as well. So if you need that, please copy and paste it, tag us. But we appreciate the input this evening, the collaboration. We love providing these webinars to our teachers. Thank you, Ms. Jackson. We appreciate you joining us this evening. We appreciate these opportunities to collaborate with amazing educators like you who are pouring into and going above and beyond after hours to join us. So we are glad you were here this evening, and we hope that something resonated with you.
And those those SCR questions should be coming to their inbox
Yes,
shortly after the conclusion of our
it should be
workshop. And
shortly after. So we will be using the email that they registered to send our sample questions. Thank you, Ms. Monica. We are glad you were here, and please, we will be sending updates with any future webinars that we do as well. But yes, the sample questions will go out to those that were registered. If you are in the chat for some reason and you missed registering for our StreamYard link, please, if you want to reach out to partners at Math-A-Matics Tutoring, we'll make sure to get that to you too.
Thank y'all. We'll see y'all next time.
We will see y'all next time. Thank y'all for joining us. Again, we're going to start Work It Out Wednesday in about 10 minutes. So even though, it's tailored to parents and things, but please join us because you're going to hear some great new strategies. We really try to break down our thinking with those math questions, just like we would in a classroom or like we do with our private tutoring. So we want to share those strategies with you. So please join us for that. But we appreciate your time this evening, and we will see you at our future webinars. If you need anything else, please reach out at the partners at mathematicstutoring.com. Y'all have a great evening, everyone.